Hello animators, I'm Madeline and today I'm gonna show you how I reanimated my first ever animation. Now, before showing you the animation, let's turn back time a bit to understand how and why I got into learning animation in the first place. So long story short, at that time I wasn't too serious about being a professional animator. I remember that back then my ultimate goal was to become a comic book artist for Marvel. I was into drawing muscles and all kind of crazy superheroes, but Spider-Man was my specialty. Reading comic books made me want to learn to draw a human figure, and because of that I got curious about learning anatomy. Drawing was my biggest passion, and I also loved movies and wanted to make a movie myself, so trying to make comics was some sort of a best of both worlds. As a 90s kid I used to love watching cartoons like Cartoon Network, Jetix, Fox Kids, you know, the 90s cartoons, which are the best by the way, and of course Disney movies. I was really curious to know how these awesome cartoons were made, and at some point I think I deviated from doing comics to wanting to learn to animate. Now we're talking about age of 15 when I actually convinced my parents to get ourselves internet connection, and that kinda changed everything. At this point I was getting pretty good at drawing, learned some anatomy, and making comics I was kinda comfortable drawing a character multiple times in different panels, from different angles, different expressions, and I thought it would be easier for me to animate. But man, I was so wrong. Starting out, I had a lot of questions and very few answers, as the internet wasn't what we have today, where you can basically find anyone at any time and ask everything you want, hoping for an instant answer. But there were some blogs made by professional Disney animators. I remember reading stuff on a blog named Handro Nomad by the great Matt Williams. So many useful insights about different techniques, and also Inspector Clouseau by another huge master of animation, Sandro Clouseau. On his blog he used to post a lot of great pencil tests and drawings and character designs, and many things that filled me with inspiration and drive to be more in love with this craft. Together with reading blogs I found some great books too, like the animation bible that we all know today, Richard Williams' Animator Survival Kit, the Character Animation Crash Course by Eric Goldberg, Animation from Pencils to Pixels by Tony White, which by the way has a new version of the book this year, and many more. I tried to gather as much information as I could, and my passion kinda grew bigger and bigger, and I squeezed the juice out of it by wanting to learn more, and I think at this point my passion for animation became an obsession. Another great form of learning animation was by studying it frame by frame. Whenever I found a great pencil test from the masters, I would digest it frame by frame, trying to understand how and why their animation is so good. Okay, but now let's see how my first animation actually looked like, and we'll get back to the main subject of this video, which is how I reanimated this old animation.
Oh, this is the worst looking hat I ever saw. Well, you buy a hat like this, I'll bet you get a free bowl of soup, huh? Oh, this is the worst looking hat I ever saw. Well, you buy a hat like this, I'll bet you get a free bowl of soup, huh?
So yeah, I could say that the biggest flaw I had was not having the patience to finish something. Animation takes a lot of care and time to make it look good, and with all the things I studied at the time and all the passion for it, I used to get frustrated real quick, to the point of not wanting to animate ever again. But when I was down, I kept on feeding myself with great animation from the masters, and naturally that made me not giving up. So getting back to my old animation, we can see that I blindly got into animating without having an actual design of the character. And this would be the first step of our process. When I'm trying to figure out the design of the character, it really helps me to have a story. Even if this is just a test shot, putting that shot as part of an imaginary story makes it more real, believable, it keeps the audience curious. Now in my old animation we can clearly see that I just wanted to move the character around without thinking too much why. Redesigning the character now gives me a nice opportunity to think about a little story for it. So let's imagine that our character is a boxer and he's at a weighting show, you know, where the boxers are getting their weights classified. They would often make fun of each other by taunting each other. It's part of that show before a fight. So again, let's imagine that he's having an opponent off screen that's wearing a hat, and our character is making fun of that hat. We'll go from there and start to design our character based on this little context we now have. When it comes to his facial features, I wanted to give him a familiar look for the audience to understand that he's a boxer. So I chose to take Floyd Mayweather or Mike Tyson as a reference because they are still the most popular boxers of all time. So seeing a familiar face would be easier for the audience to understand that our character is a boxer. You'll see that I struggled a lot to figure out his poses. I wanted the main poses to be based on the old animation. Didn't want to change the animation too much. In fact, I wanted to keep it as much as I can, and you'll see that when I start the animation process. I don't think I need a proper model sheet for this character, as I'm doing this on my own, If it was for an action production where more people were involved, I probably put together proper model sheet with expressions, rules and things to be easier for others to follow when drawing the character. But in this case I think a few poses for me would be enough to understand what I'm trying to animate. Okay, so now I think we have an appealing character and a context and we can start the animation process. I will have two passes for this animation, a rough pass and a tie-down pass. So let's start preparing the scene by placing the model sheet on a layer so we can have it near and refer to it whenever we need. And I also have the old animation on the side to inspire me. What I also did was cleaning the audio a bit by using Adobe Podcast Audio Enhancer.
Oh, this is the worst looking hat I ever saw. Oh, this is the worst looking hat I ever saw.
It's just a gimmick to have a cleaner sound to match our new and improved animation. So we're gonna do a really rough pass. Some animators will start with the planning pass, or as animators call it, thumbnailing.
Bernard from The Rescuers, and it's a very complex acting scene, probably one of the most complex in the movie. And Frank thumbnailed very carefully a path where he's going with the scene.
I'm not that used to thumbnailing. I would usually go straight into a first animation pass, which can be very rough, but I'd be able to see everything right away without having to waste time doing nice drawings and having to scrap them if the animation is not working. As I'm approaching to scribble the first pose, I realize that I'm still so afraid of this first pass. It's so scary to have a blank piece of paper in front of you, and I have to squeeze my brain a lot to find what I want to do. After all this time of animating, this is still the most terrifying, but yet the most exciting phase of the process. Because basically now you can do anything, be creative. You'll notice that sometimes I'm moving things around, I'm copy-pasting things from a frame to another. When I was younger I used to think that copy-pasting is cheating. But at this point I'm not considering it cheating because I'm not doing it as a shortcut. I'm doing that just to speed up my process and be efficient. But I also think that if you're starting out learning animation, sure we have all the advantages of working digitally, which can be very helpful, but I think if you're trying to learn animation, you can avoid doing these kind of things because it will force you to think more. But now I'm not afraid to use them because I already have a good foundation. But at the end of the day, animation is just an illusion. You have to fake it and make it look good without the audience to notice how the trick works. It's magic. Although the drawings are very rough, you can barely see the character proportions have to be there. I'm gonna focus on getting the performance idea. I don't really want nice drawings, but at least the proportions have to be right because that would make my life easier in the next pass. Getting back to the process, I think I'm done with blocking the performance, so let's see how this looks in this phase.
Oh, this is the worst looking hat I ever saw. Well, you buy a hat like this, I'll bet you get a free bowl of soup, huh? Oh, this is the worst looking hat I ever saw. Well, you buy a hat like this, I'll bet you get a free bowl of soup, huh?
As you can see, it's very rough, but don't worry, it's enough for me to understand what I want to do with the character's performance. I kinda went with having the old animation as a reference, keeping the majority of the poses, but this time I've integrated them having in mind the story. Let's try to break this down a bit. So we can slice this animation up in 5 parts. The first one, the beginning of the animation, we have a small acting beat showing the audience right away that our character is a boxer. He's doing that little punch like an unconscious movement, more like a habit. Now comparing with the old animation, we can't really tell what he's up to. He's just moving around without having a reason behind his acting. Moving on to the next part, we can now clearly see that he's making fun of someone off screen by pointing twice. I think this kind of small details gives our animation texture, making it less boring. Also, this pose I think is very readable. At the same time, we can now tell that off screen we have more people around. Part 4 is pretty similar to what we have in the old animation, that classic crossed arm stance. I kinda wanted to have it look similar because I think it still fits the story. He's bragging, feeling superior, making fun of that dude's hat. By the way, I think that hat could be like a metaphor for an ugly hair or something. Anyway, we have this strong pose, and while keeping the pose, we're gonna focus on hitting the accents from the dialogue. But we'll take care of that in the next pass. Now, to be honest, it was really difficult for me to find a way to end the acting in this shot, but I found this idea of a gesture that seemed quite familiar, this elbow nudging. I felt like this is kind of a dad joke. You'll find this acting gesture quite often in cartoons and even movies. Using an acting cliché is not bad. Of course, you can always avoid it, but sometimes it helps convey the idea. And in this case, we want the joke to be obvious. So now the most important thing I've learned at this stage is to always be aware of the performance. Ask yourself why, pay attention to the story outside your shot. Even if you don't have one, at least try to have that mindset. At the same time, think about your audience. Put yourself in their shoes. Will it be clear enough for them to understand the acting of your character? So in other words, don't just move the character around as I did in my first animation. Now that I have the performance established, let's finally move to the tie-down pass. In the tie-down pass, my goal would be to refine the movements and put the character on model, and also clarifying a lot of things that were not clear in the rough pass. And you'll see that I have the model sheet close to me to make sure I'm drawing the model correctly. Also, I'm always having the rough pass underneath, and now you'll understand why it's so important to pay attention to the proportions right from the first phase, because now I have a good structure underneath to draw my tie-down keys. I'm paying a lot of attention to the head. Actually, I'm kinda starting with that on each pose, because the main drive in this animation is the voice. I'm carefully listening to the audio and I draw the expressions to match what he's saying. By the way, when doing the lip sync, when matching the character's mouth shape to the audio, there's a rule. Draw the mouth shape to match the audio 2 frames ahead of the sound. But this rule isn't always working. It very much depends on how it feels, so whenever I'm in doubt, I just hit play, and if the rule doesn't apply, I'll just redraw that mouth shape at the same level as the audio. Lip syncing is very hard, especially when you have a lot of consonants like we have in Romanian. Animating in Romanian is like hell.
Deci, dă-mă cuțitul, lasă-mă să mă mai bucur de mine animat.
Oh, this is the worst looking hat I ever saw. Well, you buy a hat like this, I'll bet you get a free bowl of soup, huh? Oh, this is the worst looking hat I ever saw. Well, you buy a hat like this, I'll bet you get a free bowl of soup, huh?
After I'm quite happy with the tie-down keys, I'll just go ahead and break this animation down into pieces, doing the breakdowns and then the in-betweens. I'll need to mention again that everything here is a subject of change at any time. When I was just starting out learning animation, I thought that these keys are set in stone. I wouldn't touch them even though they would make my animation not working as I wanted. I would rather change everything around them and ending up working more. Yes, they are very important because they are paving the path to the rest of the drawings. They are dictating the story. But I'm not trying to stick to them so much. If something needs to be redrawn on the keys, I'll just do it. So I'm pushing to add more breakdowns here and there. I'm basically sculpting the animation by adding in more drawings, and with each drawing I'm defining the motion more and more, and at the same time I'm correcting what's not working. I'm changing the trajectories and always looking for having solid drawings. And by that I mean avoiding elements that are getting bigger or shrinking from a frame to another. I found that a lot of beginners have this problem of keeping the animation solid. You'll often see the character changing shape and size throughout an animation. To be honest, I had that problem too, and I still find it difficult to control. We all have this problem, it's not something only beginners encounter. Now, the way I'm trying to control this is by constantly flipping. I think I'm doing that as a hobby right now, to the point where I can't draw a line without flipping between drawings. It gives me dopamine. I think that over the years an animator is developing an eye at maintaining the proportions, and this is a skill trained by constant flipping between the drawings. You'll develop this skill more and more with each animation you're doing. I will often choose flipping rather than turning onion skin or the light table on. For me, onion skin is more like a tool to help me fill the gaps between drawings that are closer to each other. Another technique I learned over the years, and I think I did that a bit too late, to be honest, was using shift and trace. Now, this technique is a feature of almost every 2D animation software, but this was an actual technique back in the day when animation was done on paper. So here's an example. Let's say you want to draw the head of the character in an in-between drawing, so between two keys, and those keys are very far apart. What you'll want to do is shift those two keys until the head in each drawing will overlap where you want your head to be in the in-between drawing. So with the onion skin active, or the light table, you can now draw your head easier, knowing that you have those previous next drawings underneath. I'm doing that every time I have a complex element that needs to be drawn solid, like a face, head or hands. I like to try adding some texture to my animation where I can, and when I say where I can, that means when it actually fits the acting. Sometimes you have a character in a pose not doing much, and when that happens, you gotta look for where you can add some secondary animation to keep it alive. Here I'm trying to add a slight head nod on his fast-spoken series of words, I bet you get it.
Like this, I bet you get a free. Like this, I bet you get a free. Like this, I bet you get a free.
I kind of felt like this part would need a texture bit, because he was just in a moving whole pose while doing this dialogue. Also, when we're speaking faster, we usually add more gesture to our body language. And we are kinda limited by that pose, but I have to make sure that the head is not too distracting. So I'm just playing with the head in those frames to see what works, while constantly flipping and playing the animation while doing the changes. Again, try to flip between the drawings more than hitting the play button. What I have also struggled with was that small punch is doing the beginning, so I went back to it to change some things that weren't working as I wanted, because I wanted that punch to have a bit more power. Up to this point I have almost completed the animation, except the last part, that elbow nudge. I left it pretty confusing in my rough pass, so now I have to figure it out in the Tiedown pass. See, when I already have in mind what I want to do, I would spend less time in the rough pass. I just roughly guide myself for the future me using a few sketchy poses, and that can be enough for me to understand what I want to do in the Tiedown pass. But I won't take that for granted. I still get lost and have to rethink a lot of things. You can see here how much I struggle to find the right arc for this arm in order to have the arm moving correctly for that nudge. After I'm done with that, the animation's pretty much done. I just played a few times to see if I can improve some parts, but nothing complex, just moving some parts here and there, adjusting some lines from frame to frame, just to have clear trajectories and solid shapes.
Oh, this is the worst looking hat I ever saw. Well, you buy a hat like this, I'll bet you get a free bowl of soup, huh? Oh, this is the worst looking hat I ever saw. Well, you buy a hat like this, I'll bet you get a free bowl of soup, huh?
So we've come to the end of this long video. Hope all the info was relevant for you and also inspiring. We all struggle so much to improve ourselves over the years, and to be honest, we pick one of the most complex creative medium. Not gonna lie, animation is hard, but it's nice to share your experience with others, because we all kinda get through the same struggles without realizing that. I used to look at others animators thinking, oh god, they make it look so easy. Here I am fighting with this animation for a couple of hours and it looks like trash. After I actually got to see their process by working with them, I understood that it is actually a lot of work and frustration that went into it, and I think it's worth sharing that as well, not only the finished product. Okay guys, so to actually end this video, I just want to let you know that I have the whole process of this animation on my Gumroad page, recorded in real time for you to see the whole process. It doesn't have commentary, it's a 13 hours video. You can think about what I said here while watching the whole process. So again, everything is in real time, nothing sped up, because I would always want to see the artist working in real time, to see all the struggles behind it. I just need to feel that it's a human being behind the work, not a sped up machine. Okay, so that's it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Leave a comment if you want. Let me know what you think about this whole process. And maybe you'll have some questions, I don't know. And until next time, keep animating, keep yourself inspired, and bye.
Gata.